Guatemala is 20 years out from a horrifyingly violent period of internal conflict that went on for almost 30 years. There has been tremendous cases involving accountability, clarifying the past, but these have been individual cases, individual decisions. Overall, the commitments that were made in the peace agreement have largely not been lived up to across a range of fields. And so Guatemala stands as something of a precedent in the region because Central America generally has suffered from a lack of rule of law and a lack of accountability. At the same time, there are trends in Guatemala that are very disturbing. Corruption has gained a greater and greater foothold, especially because of trafficking of narcotics, and has tended to exacerbate a system in which impunity from the conflict period has engendered impunity today in Guatemala. There are widespread, there's a lot of violence in society, obviously. There's a terrible problem with violence against women. There are huge tensions with the indigenous communities that make up at least half of the population of Guatemala, but have been severely marginalized throughout Guatemala's modern history. There isn't, at this point, a justice system which is capable of dealing with all of these burdens. What you see is individual judges, individual prosecutors making a tremendous difference, but in terms of resourcing, in terms of political will, in terms of policy and where the country is trying to go, what it's trying to achieve, there's still a long way to go, even to fulfill the types of promises that were made in the 1996 peace agreement. The ILAC assessment in Guatemala had a broad range of expertise from a broad range of member organizations. We had 8 experts representing 7 member organizations. We were aiming to first and foremost look at the situation of the judiciary and the prosecutors in Guatemala. But we had to do it in context. Obviously, there are a lot of issues just affecting how they work. Do they have sufficient resources? Do they have sufficient security? How are they dealing with corruption allegations? How are their disciplinary procedures? What are the effects of disciplinary proceedings? Do they have a sufficiently updated code of ethics? At the same time, there are a lot of the current big issues in society that judges and prosecutors have a role in. And so we also tried to look at some of the issues such as discrimination against marginalized groups, violence against women, but also some of the issues related to large-scale development projects on land that is claimed by either peasant communities or, in most cases, by indigenous peoples in Guatemala. Issues related also to the criminalization of protest, when these communities try to find peaceful and legal ways to resist encroachment on their land. So we were looking at a broad variety of themes, but very much trying to look at them from the perspective of the justice system, the judicial power, and what it can do to try to effect reforms and positive change in Guatemala. Some of the main findings related to the current situation in Guatemala, because we came in during a real political crisis surrounding the rule of law. In August, the president of Guatemala issued an order trying to expel the head of the International Commission Against Impunity of Guatemala. And while the order was eventually suspended by the Constitutional Court, there continues to be a lot of controversy between elements of the judiciary and the prosecutorial service on one hand, and the government and parliament on the other. And So for us, it was important not to take a side in the conflict without having thoroughly analyzed it and talked to as many people as possible. But at the same time, it's impossible to ignore that situation, and it's quite important to try to issue recommendations that can be helpful in trying to assist the country to exit this very stressful situation in a way that will help to consolidate the rule of law going forward. One of the main issues coming up will be the election of a new Attorney General, the new head of the prosecution service, early next year. And so one of the most important findings in the report will be that this process must be absolutely as transparent and effective as possible. It will be crucially important that all of the organs of the state that have a role in the selection of the new Attorney General are seen to act with absolute transparency and professionalism. And this is an issue because the selection process, both for judges and prosecutors, has been subject to pretty severe and founded criticism in the past. And the extent to which old patterns are broken in the selection of the new Attorney General will be crucial, I think, as a barometer for how seriously all parties in Guatemala take their commitment to the rule of law. Guatemala has rightly been seen as a positive precedent in the region. There have been these really remarkable cases brought regarding corruption, regarding impunity for past violations and atrocities during the Civil War. There have been important decisions by the Inter-American Court of Human Rights. And of course, the international community, this UN-backed Commission Against Impunity, is really unprecedented and has been quite successful. And I think one of the risks of that is that it can be all too easy to see Guatemala as the success story in the region and decide that at this point it's not necessary to go on working with Guatemalan actors intensively to make sure that the gains that have been made are built upon and that the remaining issues are addressed, that there's a roadmap for addressing those issues that's agreed on by national actors and provides international actors effective ways of supporting them. So I do think that that this is a very important time, and that the assessment report can have a positive impact at this moment.